All right, everybody. Good afternoon. Good afternoon. Thanks for that, Ms. Dix. So my name is Kyle Strickland with the Kirwan Institute for the Study of Race and Ethnicity. We're so excited to have you all here today. But first, to kick us off is going to be Dr. Wendy Smooth, the Senior Vice Provost of Inclusive Excellence. Dr. Wendy Smooth, who's going to be joining us virtually. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. It's really my pleasure to offer both greetings to you and have the pleasure of introducing our great new executive director for the Kirwan Institute for the Study of Race and Ethnicity. I'm Wendy Smooth, and thank you, Kyle, for that introduction. I'm Wendy Smooth, the Senior Vice Provost for Inclusive Excellence here at OSU, and also a professor of women's gender and sexuality studies. And most importantly for this audience, I'm a long-term former affiliate with the Kirwan Institute for the Study of Race and Ethnicity. So it's so good to be with you. Can't believe nearly 20 years since OSU committed to a focused investment in understanding the contours of race and ethnicity in U.S. society. Over those years, we have made an indelible impact understanding race and ethnicity, class, gender, and the myriad of structural factors that inform not only U.S. society, but racial processes globally. Work from the Kirwan Institute has spanned from the local, the impacts that we have taken up have made an impact on our and our world. We've looked at the structural impacts of racism, opportunity mapping to look at the ways in which communities are unable to access quality resources from education to healthcare. Many of you are familiar with our work on implicit bias and implicit associations. We've done work around the social determinants of health, not to mention the work that we have embarked on in terms of understanding the ways in which community access to health equals wealth in our nation. We have engaged together with cutting-edge scholars who have worked with us over the years, from visiting associated professors to postdoctoral students, as well as faculty on the campus of The Ohio State University. We've done this work for nearly 20 years, and we look forward to our next chapter, which begins with welcoming our new executive director, Dr. Ange-Marie Hancock. We are really thrilled to welcome Dr. Hancock, who is, in addition to being the executive director of the Kirwan Institute for the Study of Race and Ethnicity, is also serving as the NG Axiom Endowed Professor of Political Science here at OSU. She joined Kirwan just a few months ago, and as you see, she's already off to the races and has us in full formation to look at the next years ahead. She's joining us after 15 years of faculty service at the University of Southern California and being previously taught at Yale University, Penn State, and the University of San Francisco. She's a globally recognized scholar of intersectionality theory and has written 3 books on the intersections of categories of difference like race, gender, class, sexuality, and citizenship, and their impact on public policy, including the award-winning book, The Politics of Disgust and the Public Identity of the Welfare Queen, which was published in 2004, Solidarity Politics for Millennials, A Guide to Ending the Oppression Olympics in 2011, and Intersectionality in Intellectual History, published in 2016. Right now, she's hard at work on a fourth book, which will chronicle more than 250 years of African American political thought and is entitled The Scope and Vision of African American Political Thought. Marie will find a warm place here at The Ohio State University because she's also an incredible women's basketball fan. She's not just a fan, she's an architect. In 1993, under the mentorship of NBA Hall of Famer Tom Satch Sanders, Hancock conducted the original survey research and designed the business model for what came to be the Women's National Basketball Association, which, as we all know, has been in existence now for over 25 years and the only successful women's professional basketball league in the country. Judy Hancock is not a stranger to applied research. She's both a political theorist and an applied research scholar. Recent work that she's done focused on racial and gender equity at the local and regional levels, including a racial equity baseline study for the city of Los Angeles, and co-chairing an academic analysis of governance reform in Los Angeles. She's also a community engaged scholar who uses empirically rigorous data analyses for projects like the Black Experience Action Team and the USC Department of Public Safety Community Advisory Board. Her current work includes new research projects on asylum requests by survivors of domestic violence and the Kamala Harris Project, a nonpartisan collective of scholars dedicated to tracking all aspects of the first woman of color vice president in the United States. What you will find as a fun fact about Dr. Hancock is that she hails from Columbus, Ohio, and is an alum of Thomas Worthington High School. Please join me in welcoming and the wonderful work we anticipate doing ahead at the Kirwan Institute under the leadership of Dr. Marie Hancock. Welcome, and I present her to our wonderful audience, both virtually and in the room. Welcome, Marie.
Thank you so much, Dr. Smooth, for that incredible introduction. She stole the first third of my talk, in other words. But no, I'm really excited to be here, and it's so good to see so many faces in the room, and then thank you, all of you who have joined online as well. We are thrilled to have this opportunity to talk with you about how we are going to both embrace the past of what the Kirwan Institute has done and also embrace the future. So today I'm going to talk about three things. I am going to talk about what it means to come home, and come home after you leave at 18 thinking you know everything, and that you'll never be back in Columbus, Ohio ever again, except for Christmas and Thanksgiving, only to come back and have this wonderful opportunity. This is indeed my dream job. I am thrilled to be here, and the team that we have in place, you will hear about the work that they have been doing and that they are going to do. It's been a dream so far. So thank you so much for taking the time to come and join us. And we will have a Q&A briefly afterwards, so if you have questions, just feel free to fire away and ask them. But let's get started right away. We are going to get started with coming home. So this little fun photo is actually a photo of me, yes, but I am not the person standing in the lovely scarf to the left here. I am actually the little one in the red dress. I was born here, as Wendy talked about, but what you may not know is that this is actually located at 572 Stinchcomb Drive. My dad was an alum here. He graduated from what was then the College of Education. And I had a chance to visit again in 2015, and it was still there in 2015. And one of the things that I think has been really, really wonderful about coming home is that I'm literally home. Like literally, this is where I came home to out of Mount Carmel Hospital. My first home was on this campus. And so it is such a pleasure to be back. And I think one of the other things that, my dad didn't anticipate when he and my mom drove up from New Orleans, Louisiana, after graduating from LSU, was that he would graduate here with lifelong best friends. So these are the DiLorenzos who he went to graduate school with, and I'm being held there by the guy waving hello. Or that he would have me coming along as well. So gratuitous baby photos aside, what's happened since the age of 18 in Thomas Worthington High School? The good news is I don't think I peaked in high school. I think a lot of folks, we don't want to do that, so that's good news. But after college, one of the things I did do, as Wendy was talking about, was to work for the NBA. Not something I anticipated as a political science major. And I had this fantastic mentor who actually this letter is just from a year or two ago. He was going through some things and he found the very first version of this proposal. The very first time I wrote and I said, I think the two things that are going to save women's professional basketball in the United States are the season needs to be in the summer, and the NBA needs to incubate and or own the teams. The pockets need to be deep enough. And so in 1993, January, so literally 30 years ago this year, this was my first stab at becoming a social scientist. I did a survey of the top 25 women's basketball teams, including this one right here, because there was a young woman named Katie Smith who was absolutely amazing. And what we found in terms of doing those surveys and in terms of the in-depth interviews and the literature review, we were an academic before we became an academic, was that we needed to make sure that the women who wanted to play in the WNBA had the opportunity to play overseas. Now, I tell that story very intentionally because we know what happened to Brittany Griner just this year. And so when we think about that, one of the things as the WNBA gets to turn 30 is that how do you rethink what has been a successful business model and improve it without destroying it? And this is a question we're going to come back to. So when we think about becoming a social scientist, I did these things, but here's the piece that is not on the bio that most people don't know. I did not get the opportunity to work on my own idea. So in 1993, I presented it to the person who became the first commissioner, and she said, "Thank you very much," and ran with the idea. So what do I do in that situation? Well, I go to graduate school. And so 30 years later, after my dad in 1970, my sister Janine gave me a frame with these two photos, that very first photo that you saw and this second photo of me graduating with my PhD. So I did become that social scientist, and so my steps were somewhat ordained, if you will, towards becoming a social scientist. And that's partly why something like Kirwan is my dream job, the kind of research that they do here that has an impact, right? That helps communities change what they would like to change about their own places. So, one of the things that happened in graduate school was that I had a dear friend named Scott, who's now a professor of English himself, and I told him the WNBA story, and he said to me, "Ange-Marie, the WNBA is not your last good idea." And that one sentence helped give me confidence to do the next good ideas like the politics of disgust and solidarity politics for millennials. And this book was both the most fun book because I got to talk about things like The Devil Wears Prada and Dora the Explorer. But it was also the most disheartening book because everything I talk about with regard to the Oppression Olympics in 2011, we have seen in the past 7 or 8 years in this country. The idea that groups are in a zero-sum framework and that they have to compete. The idea that one group needs to be so afraid that they are going to get leapfrogged over, that they need to destroy those groups rather than let them think about how we can live together. And if I know one thing about coming home, the history of Ohio that I have learned is that every group that has come here, whether it is certain indigenous tribes, whether it is the folks who came from Britain or France, whether it is the German immigrants who came a little bit later, or whether it was the blacks going towards freedom. They came here for freedom, and they came here for opportunity. And they came here hoping that their children would live happy and healthy lives, grow up to be adults, and live happy and healthy lives as well. And so when I think about intersectionality as an intellectual history and the ways in which that term now gets distorted, I want us to think very clearly about what are our next good ideas to remind ourselves that we all are here for many of the same reasons. We all want freedom and opportunity. We all want the chance for our kids to grow up, whether they are our biological kids, whether they're nieces, nephews, little brothers and sisters, cousins, play cousins, does not matter. We want to make sure that we have that in our state, in our city, at our university, and in our world. So, in terms of some other things that I've done, I have done some work in housing as well. I know that's a very big focus here at Kirwan, and so I was really glad again to be able to come and meet some people who are similarly minded. My work has been cited across 36 different things, and the only reason I point that out is because I wanted to be clear that Kirwan's tradition of doing interdisciplinary research about race, not limiting itself to one discipline or one school at The Ohio State University, is going to continue. So instead of this being, well, she comes and she does intersectionality, and so Kirwan is going to turn into an intersectionality house, this is going to be a place for intellectual community about race as it has been in the past. So, how do we embrace Kirwan's past? 20 years. 20 years is a pretty long time, if you think about it. We've had 20 years of opportunity mapping. Here's a very busy map that's hard to see if you're in the room, but we will share this map with you. We have done 400 plus opportunity mapping projects across this country over the past 20 years. We have also had 20 years of implicit bias and implicit association training. First 15 years, we did it in person. Close to 7,000 people were trained. Thanks to the Schott Foundation, we were able to do some online modules. And in the past 5 years, we've almost gotten just as many people trained. So thank you to that foundation. And also, we are doing this work smarter and at scale now that we have those modules. And that's going to continue to be something we want to think about. What can we do smarter and at scale? The other thing, of course, we have done is had 20 years of intensive work in and with community, locally, nationally, and at the state level. We still work with and continue to collaborate with the My Brother's Keeper Ohio network, and we have a number of efforts that we are going to continue going forward. Now, I have to pause here and say, we want to embrace this past, but I in no way, because I just got here on January 3rd, can take credit for that. So if you are a former or a current staff member of Kirwan, would you please stand and be recognized for this amazing work that has been done over the past 20 years. So the other part of this being my dream job is I have an amazing team that does this work, and they deserve the credit for all that I've just talked about. Now, how do we embrace Kirwan's future at the same time? You'll notice I said there were two parallel processes that we're doing. And part of what we've been doing is excavating what we have done and what we've done really well. But we're also going to engage in really thinking about some of the hard stuff that we need to really sort through. For example, this is a model that Deepa Iyer, who's a sociologist of social change, created that talks about the social movement ecosystem. It says that in an ecosystem of social change, we need the people who are the frontline responders, but we also need the visionaries. We need the folks who are the disruptors, but we also need the folks who are the storytellers and the guides. Everybody can do one part of this. No one can do all of this by themselves, and no one institute can do all of this. And if we're being candid and honest, sometimes Kirwan has gotten asked to do a lot of different things that aren't necessarily right in its wheelhouse. So when we think about this ecosystem, where do we fit? That's the question. Where, for the next 20 years, can Kirwan have the greatest impact? We can impact a lot of things, but where can we be great? The same way that we've been great at opportunity mapping, the same way that we've been great at implicit bias training, the same way that we've been great at partnering with communities. So we're going to ask this larger question by thinking of it as a moonshot. How do we elevate Kirwan's impact? And I'm going to argue that we do that in 3 ways. We continue to create consequential research, but the question is not how do we do more opportunity mapping the same way that we've already done it, but how do we elevate opportunity mapping? And how do we find the next big concept? So as I said to the team in January, what's the next concept after implicit bias? We know implicit bias has been amazing and impactful, so has opportunity mapping been amazing and impactful. What's the next thing? And how do we create space for us to think and dream about what that next thing is? Because it's really easy, we all know this, we all just lived through a pandemic, it's really easy to get on that hamster wheel or treadmill and never get off of it. So we want to create that space to dream. The second part of the moonshot is building intellectual community and thinking about how do we support the incredible Ohio State students, postdocs, faculty who are committed to conducting consequential community-engaged research. So we want this to be a community, and I'm really glad that both online and in person we have some of our Kirwan faculty affiliates. We also have faculty who might have been affiliates in the past, but we're going to tell you to come on back, because again, we want to build that intellectual community where we can dream, where we can figure out how to, this third bullet point, which is partner with communities who are seeking change. Now, yes, we have a long history of doing all 3 of these things, but for partnering with communities, how do we scale the change? How do we create, for example, epistemic communities? And what I mean by epistemic communities is simply, it's not just what you know, it's who you know it with that creates the scale of change, right? So we need to say, if 3 cities want to come to us and do opportunity mapping, where can we scale up by having them also collaborate with each other? Not just we deal with this one, we deal with this one, and we deal with this one, and it's 3 silos. How do we partner and help people say, hey, you all are concerned about safety. We're going to partner with you on this piece. You all want to work on housing. We're going to collaborate and have 3 cities work together, or 3 states work together, or 3 countries work together on something of consequence. So this moonshot is going to kind of get fleshed out in what I'm calling a strategic visioning process. And that process is going to have 3 C's associated with it. So if you don't hear anything else that I have to say today, remember the 3 C's. The first is that we are going to continue in the tradition of being collaborative. The strategic visioning process is going to be a collaborative process. So when we are drawing boundaries 2 years or 3 years from now around what Kirwan does do and what Kirwan does not have the capacity to do, it will have been the product of a collaborative process. Not Ange-Marie comes in and decides we're not doing this anymore. A collaborative process. Staff, key stakeholders, community partners, faculty and staff, students. We're all going to talk about and ask these questions. As I've mentioned, it's going to be community engaged. We're not going to go off and then you'll see the little smoke coming out of the chimney and we've decided, okay? This will instead be community engaged. And then the last is probably the toughest, because we're going to have to ask some challenging questions. We all, unfortunately, only have 24 hours in a day. We all can only get so much done. And so that does mean that sometimes things that we really love, we maybe can't always do as much as we used to, right? I know I felt that way after the pandemic, okay? Maybe no more popcorn for lunch and dinner, okay? So again, we want to think about this strategic visioning process as being something that is structured to have this conversation. And we are going to have a strategic visioning committee. We're in the process of populating that committee. It will include faculty. It will include our leadership team. It will include members of the community. And so we are trying to populate that committee. That we will also have 2 subcommittees. And if you want to ask me more about the mission, you can ask me in the Q&A of each of these committees. But the idea here is to very much have a conversation this calendar year. So when I say estimated timeline up there, I have that kind of highlighted and underlined because it's more important to me that we do this right than that we do this fast. So we're going to have this conversation, and the idea is that we would launch next month, which is why I wanted to tell everyone about it first so that you're aware of what we're going to do. We are going to do our committee work roughly between April and August. And then the idea would be that we would announce the strategic vision in September. Now, I would love to say we could have it done September 1st, September 10th, September 25th. Not sure. I just want to be transparent about that. We may need more time. I'd rather do it right. And then we're going to take us as a team internally the last quarter of 2023 to really map out what the implementation looks like, right? So how do we build this out? And then we launch the actual implementation in Q1 of January 2024. So we will continue the work that we plan on doing, that we've committed to doing, but we will also have time carved out for these kinds of conversations. And even if you are not a member of the committee, you still get to participate. Remember, I'm a survey researcher. We will ask you questions. We will invite you to listening sessions, okay? We will ask for your feedback. We will even have, because again, I'm a survey researcher, an anonymous email address where you can send your materials in and you won't have them associated with your name or your identity if you choose not to. So again, we want to make sure you know that you have an opportunity to participate in this process. Couple of frequently asked questions. The purpose of this process, I'm going to start in the middle, is to learn about where Kirwan has been. That's the parallel process number 1. And also decide where Kirwan would like to go. And where will you learn the results? At our 20th anniversary commemoration. So we are again planning to honor the past by really recognizing during a 2-day symposium all of the work that Kirwan has done. And we also want to make sure we look to the future. What is that dream that we are going to put out there? What's our moonshot going to look like? We want to make sure that you are saving the date already for the fall when we are going to have our 20th anniversary commemoration. So at that 20th anniversary, we will ask questions about Kirwan's community and policy impact, its academic impact, Kirwan's people, and we hope Kirwan's new strategic vision. So with that, I want to say thank you very much for being here, being online with us, and happy to have a few questions, should there be any, or comments. Glennon, one of our team members, for people in the room, will have a microphone. And then we will also be taking questions over, Glennon will get those via text, so that folks can actually, if you're on the webinar and you want to ask questions, you can make sure that your voice is heard as well. So thank you.
We've got 2 questions. You have to use the microphone so they can hear you online.
Hi, Dr. H.
Hi.
What will the academic subcommittee focus on?
So glad you asked. Thank you very much. We will, can we go back to the deck for a second? Sorry about that. It needs to go forward past the thank you. That's okay. There we go. There we go. Two more. There we go. So when we're talking about the academic committee, we are talking about three things. Go back, yeah. To provide, the first thing we're going to do is we're going to really deeply analyze Kirwan's academic impact. And so one of the things we can talk about is not just when we think about opportunity mapping as something that Kirwan has done that's unique, but what does it exist and how does it exist and coexist with other efforts in the space? One of the neat things, of course, in 2003 was that when Kirwan was first founded, right, there weren't a lot of research-based race institutes all over the country. Now there are. There are a ton of them. And so again, we want to think about what impact has Kirwan had on that creation, right? They didn't all just happen in the past 3 years. Kirwan has had an impact on that development. The second thing that the academic subcommittee is going to focus on is they're going to explore the ways in which we can expand Kirwan's academic impact. One of the things that we would like to do more of is to make sure we are publishing academic papers as much as we are publishing reports, right? Again, because that's part of the support system for faculty who affiliate with us. You don't get to get tenure at a place like The Ohio State University without academic papers or academic publications. And so those faculty who affiliate with us, we want to make sure that there's not an opportunity cost to your participation in what we do at Kirwan. Yes, we will do reports and partnerships with community, but that same research project can also be spun into an academic publication as well. So it's a two-track, it's not an either-or, it's a two-track. And we've done some of that. I certainly have done some of that in my past work at research institutes. Okay? Thank you very much for that question. Yes.
Hello, Dr. H.
Hi.
My name is Emmanuel Long. Look forward to meeting you again. I'm a third-year undergraduate student and majoring in medical anthropology and neuroscience with a minor in African American studies. And so when it comes to what you're presenting about the current moonshot, something that was very peculiar to me was wanting to include students in the vision of building that intellectual community. And so as we think about the existing platforms and channels that students have access or can get access to the Kirwan Institute using, what are current platforms that students can access Kirwan? And then what do you think are what are some ways that you think Kirwan could expand the ways that students can engage in the work that you do if they're impassioned to do so?
So I have to start the answer with, first, thank you very much for the question. But I have to start the answer with the idea that students are at the heart of the kinds of research projects that I would envision going forward. Whether you are an undergraduate student or whether you're a doctoral student or whether you're a master's student, I would anticipate that there is a role in a research project for you. What does that look like today? I can tell you what we have right now, and then one way that we've actually applied for some funding. And so in terms of how it works right now, we do have research projects where we hire primarily master's level and doctoral students. We have just applied for some funding with the Office of Diversity and Inclusion, ODI, and Dr. Daniel will appreciate this especially, because we have applied for funding to actually get some of the young scholars to actually participate in our research projects. And so ideally, if we get that funding, they would participate in the work that we're doing with the City of Columbus. And we want to kind of think about the work that we're doing with the City of Columbus around the My Brother's Keeper program that's here as a model, as a pilot for other chapters here in Ohio. And if we do that model and that pilot with young scholars here, one of the great things about the Young Scholars program, I know from personal experience, I taught 7th grade math one summer, is that those students come from all over the state. And so if we are doing this in Akron, there are young scholars from Akron who can be part of that project. If we're doing this in Toledo, if we're doing this in Dayton, if we're doing this in Cincinnati, right? And so we want to not just say, we can train you, but also that you have knowledge that is going to be valuable to the research project as well. And we have another, I just met with actually another young scholar, Rayana, who worked on our work with the Black Maternal and Child Health Project last year. And so again, that would be the second option, right? You can choose as you, if you're somebody who gets this funding, you can choose between either the My Brother's Keeper project or the Maternal and Child Health Project that we have going on. And so again, we want to make sure that there is an opportunity for undergraduate students. We have some, not as many existing opportunities right now, but we've applied for funding and our fingers are crossed that we will get that to be able to involve undergraduate students.
Going to do a question from the internet. What do you see as the work of Kirwan in the current political climate where there is backlash against issues of race and ethnicity?
Great question. I think there are two things that we do. The first thing that we do is we continue to do the incredible work that we have always done. Toni Morrison said that one of the very functions of racism is distraction, to get you off of your spot, right? And so one of the things that Kirwan is 100% committed to doing is the work that we have committed to do. And that does not change because of who's in office. That does not change because of people who don't like it, right? And we've always done what I think is incredibly rigorous work. So I think the other thing is we commit again and again and again to the excellence that we've always been known for. So yes, you can question our methodology, and we've had lots of technical, kind of nerdy conversations about Z-scores and all other kinds of things for those of you who might be social scientists. But again, we can have those nerdy conversations, but we want to commit to putting out the best possible research. The second thing is to know our lane. Our lane is research. Our lane is, here are the facts of what we see on the ground, people telling us what is true about their lived experience in their community. That is what we commit to.
You're good. Okay. Any more questions in the room? Got one down there? I'll come around. No worries, Mike.
Hi, Dr. Hancock. Welcome home. We are so happy to have you here in Columbus. So, Mike Shattuck, I'm in Mayor Ginther's office. Mayor Ginther has a very, very active Department of Equity and Inclusion, a new director who's really hit the ground running. My question is, how do we increase the collaboration between Kirwan and the city of Columbus? And then one step further, our region is growing like crazy, right? Mm-hmm. We've got 1 million people coming here in the next 25 years. How do we engage our suburban mayors, managers, city council members that, often are in alignment, but it seems like they're kind of siloed, right? So what's your kind of thought on how do we take it to the next step?
Sure. So I have a couple of ideas, but again, would want to hear more about what other folks would think as well, right? I think one thing that Kirwan has done in the past, and probably because of the pandemic hasn't done as much, since 2020, is use its convening power to really start to think about what does that conversation look like, right? So if Kirwan is convening a table, if we will, who's at that table? And how do we make sure that that table stays in contact with each other and tries to hammer something out? The example that I can use from my own personal experience is we did a council in Los Angeles called the Council on Immigrant Integration. And we had everyone at the table. And again, that's what you do in rigorous research, right? You do have the sheriff's department there. You do have the folks who are the immigrant rights folks there. You do have the faith community and everyone else at the table. And we hammered out some principles for immigrant integration. And were they as liberal as the people on the far left would like? No. Were they as conservative as the people on the far right would like? No. But the first thing that we did in that circle was you need to pick out one person you don't know, and you need to commit to having coffee with them twice before our next meeting, so that those conversations and lines of communication were open. And so I don't want to say that that model automatically would work here. Columbus is not Los Angeles, but I think about the Columbus way, and I think that level of wanting to collaborate and convening is something Kirwan could absolutely kind of help with if folks are interested.
I'm going to do another question from online. What is Kirwan's commitment to our growing new American neighbors, immigrants, refugees, and political asylum seekers?
Thank you for that question. This is one of those questions that's close to my heart, both from my research perspective of, looking at the Northern Triangle and looking at folks who are seeking asylum in my own personal research, but also in thinking about what I was saying a little bit earlier, which is people come to the Central Ohio area, they come to the state of Ohio, they come to the United States in general, right, wanting happy and healthy lives. And if we're going to be intellectually responsible, we can't simply talk about the folks who were born at Mount Carmel Hospital like me. We can't simply talk about the folks who were born at Nationwide or at Riverside or over here at Wexner. Don't worry, I haven't forgotten Wexner. We have to think about the folks who come here with their own hopes and dreams. And we have to remind ourselves and each other, right, that we all came for that reason. And that's all part of our history.
Thank you. Any other questions in the room? I've got one down here. I'm going to scoot around. Oh, no worries.
It's not really a question.
Yes, ma'am.
My name is Deborah Diggs. I'm just a servant, a community person. And so encompassing all that what you're talking about, definitely please don't forget about the little peoples and the new Americans and the immigrants and the young scholars and the My Brother's Keepers and the future OSU undergrads. Because when you said 20 years, I was like, has it been that long since me and Kip sat on the South Side and talked about the Kirwan Institute? Yeah. You're going, what the heck is that? So yes, so please don't forget about those individuals like myself who may never had an opportunity to get into a room to have these discussions, to be a part of this when you're talking about the academics and you're talking about all the other part of it. Because I see we got the students in the room, don't recognize a lot of community people, got government and some other things, but those immigrants, I deal with them every day. Mm-hmm. They're coming here, like you said, and it is so heartbreaking to think about do they have a voice at some of the tables and who's representing them? So thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you for that comment. I can say we do have that in that community subcommittee mission. One of the pieces that I would like to do is I would love to collect oral histories from the folks in the community who have worked with Kirwan, right? So again, it's not just, what did we do? Did we publish in this journal? Did we have this great book that we, put together? Or even the amazing documentary film that Kirwan once did, I think we also want to make sure that we have those oral histories represented. And one of the kind of aspirations is that we would be able to digitize that and have that on a new website. And we're in line, we're going to get that done too, but have that available to people because people need to understand the heart of what we really have done, frankly, over these past 20 years. I mean, I remember when Kirwan was first founded and how excited, we were talking in my family when I would come home for holidays about, do you know what this means? This is so cool. This is so fantastic, right? And then the work that got done, I think in people's lives that actually changed, that's more important than just being cool about having, a building and a bunch of people studying things. Not that that's not cool, because I am a true nerd.
Not a question,
Yes, ma'am.
just a comment to say that we at the state of Ohio, from the Ohio Commission on Minority Health, really have historically appreciated the relationship, the foundation, and the dialogue that impacts political thought and decisions. So the work of Kirwan has historically impacted what has shifted at the state in terms of African American infant mortality and certainly now maternal mortality. But how we continue to need this institution and this institute to challenge the thinking, to put the data out. It has helped our state agency shift from pilot to policy, moving from one hub to 12 hubs to scale it across the state. But it was the work of Kirwan, that research and that opportunity mapping. And so we just are appreciative, and we are in a continually challenging time, what is new, but we have to continue to speak truth to power.
Absolutely. Thank you very much for that message.
We do have another online question, and I believe this is related to the question about involving students in the kind of visioning process. And the question is, what about the relationship with Metro Early College, middle and high school, who are doing capstones and considered freshmen at OSU?
That is something I would love to learn more about in terms of getting them involved. I will say that there is a tiered way of getting involved with Kirwan's research. I think you've heard from two different people in the room who have talked about the impact of Kirwan's research. That means, just like with the strategic visioning process, we have to do that research right. And what I mean by that is that people need skills and training to do things like GIS mapping, right? That's not something that you organically come out knowing how to do when you are born. That is a skill that needs to be taught. And so we would be committed to things like cross-generational models, right? And again, we would want to build out and have an infrastructure for that. But if we can have master's level students training undergraduates, and undergraduates who are sophomores, juniors, and seniors training Metro students, I think those kinds of cross-generational mentoring models are actually one of the keys to improving our pipeline of diversity at the faculty level ultimately.
Any other questions in the room?
You can ask another one, go ahead.
Can you talk more about the community committee and what that will look like?
Sure thing, we will go back to that as well. So I talked about one piece of it already, just the piece that I'd like to do some oral histories. But in terms of community, the community subcommittee's mission, one of the other things is to elicit greater clarity to Commissioner Dawson's point, which is how Kirwan's work can continue its positive impact at the local, state, federal, and transnational levels. So we have done I've done some of that work, certainly in my past career, and that's the kind of work that we would continue to want to do here. But again, knowing our lane, we are nonpartisan, we do not lobby, we provide data. And again, we provide rigorous data about race and ethnicity so that then folks who want to use that can then make their cases.
One other question in the room. Yep.
Well, thank you so much for your amazing talk and introduction. I'm an assistant professor of philosophy here and in a steering committee for the Center for Ethics and Human Values. Mm-hmm. And I was thinking, as you were talking, that like a lot of things that are the mission of this institute are also overlapping with other centers in the university who might not be as hands-on with providing empirical data or like engaging with the community, but they're also like doing similar kind of work in changing narratives or rethinking ways that we've thought about things or we conceptualize things. And I was wondering whether you can see a clear path or help me see a clear path for how we can like pour in our resources and strengthen our bonds in ways that can help us benefit from things that we can offer each other, but also strengthen our force for generating change. Thank you.
Yes, so thank you for asking a question. As, again, an applied political theorist, these are the kinds of questions that I love to get. I think I would say, again, two things. The first is, I think Kirwan, one of my mandates is to improve the collaboration that Kirwan has with university institutes and centers. So certainly working with peers and everybody over at your institute and other institutes as well. We have folks from Cura here, for example. Again, I think that's part of what we want to create space to figure out, right? So when we scale and we're able to kind of do things like have the modules do the implicit bias training, we free up our team's time to then be able to say, well, what does a collaboration look like that would be really robust, right? I think the other thing, now this is just me as a political theorist / philosopher. I think the other thing that we really need to create space for is what Robin Kelly used to call freedom dreams, right? Like, what are those visions of our future? And so again, that's where I think people in the humanities, you don't have to know how to do GIS or be a survey researcher to be involved with the Kirwan Institute. And in the past, we've had at least one political theorist that I know of, as well as historians and folks from the literary and kind of critical world, be a part of Kirwan, and I would encourage that. Last thing I'll say, sorry, it was 3 instead of 2, is we also want to create multiple epistemic communities. So yes, there are going to be folks who are already steeped in this work, who are already kind of committed or maybe have works in progress and expertise in this area, but we also want to create an epistemic community for folks who want to get involved in this. I've already met with faculty in engineering and in other places where, Kirwan's expertise could be of value to them, not because they're already experts, but because they'd like to incorporate the scholarship in a way that is ethical as well as rigorous.
Well, that is all of our time. Thank you so much for joining us. But before we close, let's give a huge thank you to our new executive director, Dr. Ansmarie Hancock. There will be food and refreshments at 4:30, kind of a hot food. There's like appetizers, right? And it's literally being willed in just as we speak, or unless that's someone random walking through. It is being willed in as we speak, so feel free to mingle around. We'll be closing around 5, so and she's got a flight to catch, so in a little later. So, but definitely have the opportunity to meet with Dr. Hancock, and we're just so grateful to be here today. Thank you.